I'm truly not a Bible thumper. No, I'm not. But I do have the Bible. Yes, that's the book for some me's, but not me. Okay. We're going to be talking about Calvinism. Perhaps we can do better than Calvinism simply because Calvin introduced, that is, to the church, let's say it was something extremely artificial. It was an approach to use the text, to repurpose the text for philosophical purposes and also for judicial purposes, not for the intent of any of the authors. And so there's one approach that would say, let's look at what the authors might have intended. When we do that, based upon translation theory, we would have a much different model of translation if we did that, based upon the reconstruction processes of the various text and these languages involved. We have different outcomes. That is, these authors are not in harmony. They're not suggesting the same thing, and they're all over the place, and that is obvious. But that's not what most theologians are selling or marketing. People are trying to market something that has complete harmony. It reminds me of a lot of what's going on today. The news media is saying, no, Trump, you can't have nationalism. And yet, for some reason, they don't mind Mueller taking a very nationalistic approach, that is, in law, that is to get into the X, Y's, and Z's concerning what he was hired on for. And I will talk about that in detail at some point. But with that said, welcome, Bob, to the show. Hello, Bob.
Well, yeah, I'm here. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't see you, but they're going to have to push a button so I can see you, and then, I get this wonderful feed of seeing all of you guys. Let's see if they can do that. Yeah, I still can't see you.
They need to push the right button.
Yeah, if they will go to an aux button and push that so I can see the broadcast, that would be nice. Hint, hint, hint.
Hint, hint.
Okay.
Hello.
I'm in the dark, so the blind can't lead the blind, so go ahead and take it away.
Yeah. Well, we not only have me here, we've also got Daryl, and we have Diana. So how are you guys doing?
I'm doing good. How about you, Diana?
Oh, I'm fine and frisky as far as that goes.
Cool. Yeah.
Fine and frisky. Define frisky here tonight, Diana.
Well, it's in a non-romantic sense.
The cat's name is Frisky.
Say again.
The cat's name is Frisky.
Yeah, I bought the cat little Friskies a couple days ago. I hope she eats the stuff.
Okay, it's obvious that some of us have been through at least 20 to 30 rapture events. I haven't left the ground yet. However, my grandfather, he was a big advocate of the rapture. And if you would have known the guy, you would have loved him. I mean, he's a Swede, 100% Swede. I mean, he used to sing me all kinds of songs in his native tongue. But my point is, when he was up a certain amount of thousands of feet up in the air in one of these airliners, the lady said, "What are you doing? You're in the middle of the aisle and you're jumping." And my grandfather turned to the stewardess and said, "Well, I'm rapture practicing." I thought that was so funny. And so for those of you who enjoy all of the hoopla over the rapture, I mean, it's a lot of fun to watch what people say and do over this issue of the rapture, but I thought that I would throw that in. Also, my wife sent a message that she wanted me to read to you, Diana. She apologizes for not being here tonight. She so wanted to be here tonight, but unfortunately, we're going through a trying time, that is with my mother-in-law, and we've had to call in hospice. And so this is a very difficult time. And so she so wanted to be here. She loves you so very much. And so, with that said, let's.
She's just too kind. Sorry, you.
Yeah. Okay. I had fun on an earlier show today, and I wanted to go a little bit further down the trail of why we are now seeing people write, author, and do blah, blah, blah with Nashville statements and all of that. And so I would like to hear some discussion. Bob, perhaps you can get into this first.
Well, at least concerning the Nashville statement, I'm a bit dismayed at it, to be honest with you. Well, I'm glad they're honest enough to tell us what they think, but it just what I find so bothersome is they don't seem to really know what the latest in science and studies are in this, and they're just remaining loyal to a text that is becoming year by year less reliable in terms of its claims.
Right. It's as if they are dismissing the best lexical theory that we have. They're dismissing all of the people who are dealing with, let's say, translation theory and how all of that works. And they are in favor of their opinion, and their opinion is so against the LGBTQ community. And I'm sickened by this, because this isn't about what the Bible says or about what these ancient manuscript writers were attempting to say. It has nothing to do with that. And when they try to tether that, it's like, wow, who do they think we are? A bunch of fools? I mean, this is absurd that they would attach this in any sense to the Bible. And I understand that, everyone knows that the Bible is a translation, and everyone knows that all of these Bible translations are not in agreement. Ding, ding, ding. Everyone knows that these things have many, many problems, and it doesn't take someone who is a linguist to understand, wow, it's not so easy to render someone who is using metaphor. It's just not that easy. And so when you are 2,000 years, if you're that removed from the text environment, and you don't have all the, linguistic and non-linguistic elements, and you are at a lack, to say the least, and yet we have people who don't want to deal with the facts. They want to spin it in a different way. And we have so many wonderful, wonderful scholars like Ann Nyland, John Lee, and others who have articulated well something that should put to rest for all of us what these authors are suggesting concerning the LGBT communities or people who are concerned about that. Hello. Anyone?
Yeah, I will say something. I was having a conversation earlier with some folks, and we were talking about how resistant people are to change. And there's traditionally in most churches, at least from what I understand, they read certain passages from the Bible that say that, or make it fairly obvious that God is against these things, and of course, what you're talking about would be a proper translation that would be to the contrary. But most people, let's face it, aren't exposed to this, possibly don't even know about it. But I guess I have a curiosity question. Why would there ever have been a text? Because obviously this is not something that some God said. This is something that man said God said. Why would there ever have been this this stand against, let's just say, homosexuality? Where did this originate? Where did this idea come from? That this was a bad thing and people were, God hated it or that sort of thing. Does anyone have any information?
Well, a Jewish friend of mine mentioned that it's possibly in relation to the priesthood, where the practices in the neighborhood by other groups that included ritual sex, homosexuality, were disdained by these Israelites, and they outlawed them. It's one possibility. Another possibility is that they simply didn't like icky butt sex. You don't outlaw something that isn't happening. I'm really not as great a scholar in that area as I'd like to be, but I'm looking into it. And as you said, Daryl, it's what man said, God said, because every time I hear about the Word of God, all I hear is people talking.
Mm-hmm.
And, God always agrees with whoever's talking. So I'm tending to believe that it might be as much just disdain that certain people had for the acts as it was for anything else.
Okay, there has been a question asked. That is, what is the Nashville Statement? Bob, I sent you a link.
I
Could
have
you
it.
pick out, just a few of those articles and read those to us, just to bring people up to date as to what we're talking about here?
Yeah. Well, it's a rather lengthy statement.
Right.
So there's a number of articles, including oh my goodness, there's about there's 8 pages of it there, but most of them are really just people who signed on. About 3 pages of content. But we affirm that people who experience sexual attraction for the same sex may live a rich and fruitful life, pleasing to God through faith in Jesus Christ, as they, like all Christians, walk in purity of life. We deny that sexual attraction for the same sex is part of the natural goodness of God's original creation, or that it puts a person outside the hope of the gospel. That strikes me as ambiguous a bit here. We affirm that sin distorts sexual desires by directing them away from the marriage covenant and towards sexual immorality, a distortion that includes both heterosexual and homosexual immorality. We deny that an enduring pattern of desire for sexual immorality justifies sexually immoral behavior. Again, I find the statement to be ambiguous and a bit vague.
Read Article 10.
Article 10. We affirm that it is sinful to approve of homosexual immorality or transgenderism, and that such approval constitutes an essential departure from Christian faithfulness and witness. We deny that the approval of homosexual immorality or transgenderism is a matter of moral indifference, about which otherwise faithful Christians should agree to disagree. This statement is perhaps a little clearer, but it is still ambiguous in that it says that we affirm that it is sinful to approve of homosexual. So that, are they just talking about homosexuality or homosexual immorality? And then they say, or transgenderism. So says transgenderism, is it cascading the immorality word here, or is it, so I find that the statement is worded in a way that lacks the clarity that I
Right.
think
It is
really
poorly
being
written.
expressed.
I agree. Look at 13. Read Article 13.
Yeah, 13 says, we affirm that the grace of God in Christ enabled sinners to forsake transgender self-conceptions, and by divine forbearance to accept God-oriented or God-ordained link between one's biological sex and one's self-conception as male or female. Now, that is a very clear statement, and I
Right.
would say that it is psychologically naive and absolutely abysmally ignorant.
Thank you.
There's just absolutely no evidence of any sort of any scientific value to affirm such a statement as that. It's pure defense of their biblical theology.
Please read that again just for the sake of putting this on the table, Bob. I want you to read that clearly, and then
Okay.
I want you to rebut that.
Okay, we affirm that the grace of God in Christ, this is Article 13, enables sinners to forsake transgender self-conceptions and by divine forbearance to accept the God-ordained link between one's biological sex and one's self-conception as male or wow. Uh, First of all, I would have to say that the science of understanding the psychology of personal identity, sexual identity, is itself a very complex topic, and it involves a great deal of issues, not just of genetic questions, but of developmental questions and as well as environmental questions. And there is zero evidence that anybody who, no matter what their preference is capable of somehow, through the grace of God, capable of forsaking just such an identity. It appears to me that these identities are well formed by the age of puberty without regard to what we do or do not understand in terms of how they actually come about. But a person who reaches the age of puberty is pretty much aimed in a particular direction, from which there will be little variation without significant trauma or some other event like that. Um, it's not. There's no evidence that this is the sort of thing that can significantly change. Um, Now, it can modify. I really do believe that as a person becomes far more mature, that um, they can find themselves dealing with far more realistic expectations. But I think that people, even who mature, who grow up, will still maintain a certain connection to even some of their infantile, less mature states of being that can reemerge if they go through tragedy or trauma or what have you. So that to me, they just don't seem to be the least bit aware of the studies that have gone on in sexual identity, which, there's still admittedly a great deal of controversy, a great deal of wider range of opinions as to what's really going on or what the theories might be that help to explain it all. But none of those theories include this kind of a concept. We already know that something similar to this took place in the so-called homosexual community, where there were people who had ministries where they believed they were actually going to cure people of their homosexuality. And although there have been many who've been claiming to have gotten into the cure, nonetheless, we find that it's still true that these people, if you follow them around and find out what they're doing, they ain't so cured as they claim to be. I think this is an unfortunate. Article 13 is far more blatant and clear in what it's saying, and totally baseless as far as I'm concerned.
Well, let me state this before I go to Diana, because I hurt for Diana. That is, being on this program, hearing this kind of shit. I don't know what else to call it but shit, because this is, well, let me save that for another program perhaps. But I mean, to disparage people, to speak so ignorantly is just, this is 2017, guys. I mean, this isn't the Dark Ages. But my point is, we witnessed this Nashville statement. We just had the Manhattan statement, and we can go back and back and back. And please understand how theology is formed and how translation theory is formed by the fundamentalist. These people will always form and shape translation theory based upon these types of things. In other words, they want to develop creed after creed. These people are all creedless. They're going to hold to the creeds. The majority of these people hold to the creeds just like they do the scripture, quote unquote, or the Bible. And so to them, this is everything that's done with, namely, the Bible. It's being theologically driven, and there is an againstness. and people are becoming people who repurpose the text. They're not interested in, let's say, if you listen to John Piper, he will say a handful of things about the Greek, but he doesn't know anything about the Greek text. And yet he will use Greek as a badge to get people to think, oh, I know what I'm talking about because I can say a handful of Greek words. I mean, come on, give me a break, John. Come on this show and we'll talk it over. My point is, when you look at the creeds define theology. The creeds have never been a measurable test as to what the textual authors were suggesting. They never have been. And this is why our lexicons have been extremely failed. And so I keep telling people who use Strong's Concordance, I mean, come on, use it as possibly a doorstop. I mean, when someone throws Thayer's up in my face, I laugh simply because these people are doing things according to creedal nature. They are walking as if we're back in the day of Holy Ghost Greek. They don't know anything about lexical theory. They know nothing about linguistics. They know nothing about the non-linguistic issues that are required to understand intent, etc. And so this bothers me a lot. And this is all about bashing human beings that want to have a chance to be just human here on this little round ball that we call Earth. What say you, Diane? I apologize that these people are doing this, but I didn't do it. They did it, but it upsets me. What say you?
Yeah, I'm going to say there's really no need for you to apologize because you did nothing. I hope you don't mind if I take the gloves off on this one, because these people are encroaching upon my territory, not only as one studied in neuroscience, but as one they are attacking. Hey, I happen to be a transgender woman. If you don't mind, let me pull up something a little bit more recent than 1,500-year-old text. This is a paper from Zhu, Hoffman, Gurin, and Schwab from 1995. I know it's 22 years old. A few things have come to light since, but this abstract is the most concise I've found yet. Transsexuals have the strong feeling, often from childhood onwards, of having been born the wrong sex. The possible psychogenic or biological etiology of transsexuality has been the subject of debate for many years. Here we show that the volume of the central subdivision of the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis, BST, small case c, a brain area that is essential for sexual behavior, note that, is larger in men than in women. A female-sized BST, small c, was found in male to female transsexuals. The size of the BSTC was not influenced by sex hormones in adulthood and was independent of sexual orientation. Our study is the first to show a female brain structure in genetically male transsexuals and supports the hypothesis that gender identity develops as a result of interaction between the developing brain and sex hormones. In other words, kids, we're born that way. We're built this way. If you subscribe to the idea that God created us, then God created us this way. What are we to do other than deal with it? And not all of us, but many of us deal with it by undertaking transition. I myself transitioned back in 2010. I finally decided, look, I've had enough of this. I've got to live as I know I am, which I knew, by the way, from age, 7, 6? That's 53 years, kids, that I've known about this. So the people who wrote Leviticus, I don't remember chapter and verse, as far as a male shall not wear what pertaineth to a female and otherwise. Number one, said absolutely nothing about transsexuality. And second of all, for all I know, had different reasons for discussing that than, the transvestites that I happen to know who identify as the sex they are, but occasionally like to play the role of the opposite sex. And you have male to female transvestites, female to male transvestites also. If I'll say it again, if you maintain that your God created us, and you maintain that your God made no mistakes, look, here we are. What are we supposed to do? I get the feeling that you simply don't like us. I think I've said it before. I'll say it again. I wonder if these people who are complaining about us are afraid that they're going to be attracted to one of us. Their own fears. Please leave us alone. We're not hurting you at all. If you want, just look the other way. What's there to be afraid of?
Diana, I would have to say, after getting to know you, I would have to ask the question, what's not to like?
Well, thank you. You're too damn kind, but
Oh, not at all.
it's, the person we are comes from inside. It's not necessarily what we look like. I mean, okay, that plays a little bit of it, but the person inside is what's important.
Exactly.
My saying, my reacting, rather than what I've got going up here and down there.
Diana, we are going to do a show in just a couple of weeks, and we're going to get into the details as to what all these biblical passages actually mean. That is, from the standpoint of the authors.
A lot of them are
what's the
badly
likelihood
translated.
of this and that, and we're going to get into that. But tonight, I can assure you that nowhere in the fabric of the reed, that is in Hebrew or Greek, are any of these individuals writing against you. What's happening here, you have some modern-day bigots who are picking up on some bigotry that was authored by theologians years ago, and this is extremely sad. This isn't a measured approach toward the text. This has nothing to do with people who are really, really invested, that is, in knowing what the text actually means. These are people who have something in their heart, and this heart is full of hatred, and that's what we have here. And these people are standing behind a narrative of hate. They're standing behind a narrative of ignorance. They are spinning this because they want to spin not their version of the Bible, not their version of the text. There is no hermeneutic that could get them to that point. This is just a denial of the facts. This is just, I mean, it's pitiful, Bob. I mean, what say you?
Well, I wouldn't, as although I would condemn it as strongly as you do, I would say that I think that there are numerous and various reasons why people buy into this, and some of it has to do with well-intended naivete, which they're entirely unaware of the damage and the hatred that it creates. So I think that there are some rather naive people involved in this who are just trying to be faithful to what they think is the truth, and have not really come to terms with exactly what all the implications are here. So, but at the same time, well, they need to get themselves a better education. But something I was thinking of even earlier that I wanted to say, but I didn't want to interrupt what was going on. The conversation was going very well. Is this? It's interesting to note that a lot of people think that God invented marriage, and the truth is that marriage has been a practice of the human race, something along those lines, long before any of these religions ever got on board. And that when even the biblical text talks about Adam and Eve, it is doing so at a time which is considerably past the moment in which it occurred, and it's really a commentary on this after the fact. Not only that, but here's something a lot of religious people and a lot of irreligious people have no clue about. Marriage has never been a religious event. Marriage has always been an event that was controlled by the government of the community or the government of the country. Always. That's all. Marriage has always been a legal matter. And in fact, the relationship of husband and wife has, in some cases, actually been understood as distinct from the legal relationship of marriage. And so that it's just that the religions have adopted their sense of morality, their sense of right and wrong. And in every country where they have been engaged in these practices, they do so only under the permission of the governments that allow it to happen. I mean, I was a minister. The right to perform a marriage was not a right that I had from the religion, but a right that I had from the government. I was an agent of the government if I was to perform a wedding ceremony, and I had paperwork to fill out that would go to the county clerk, And so what a lot of people, when they're trying to talk about, what God did with marriage, no, marriage came before the biblical text was ever written. Marriage.
Go ahead. Just try to tell people that, marriage, which grew out of human pair bonding, and then pair bonding has been around for a lot longer than the 6,000 years they think the earth has been around. I mean, human pair bonding has been around for what, maybe 100,000 years?
Most likely, yes. And and so religion, is something that emerged eventually, and it was in some ways an attempt to reconcile both, personal experiences of otherness and the need to kind of somehow control a population through the way that it organized its government, and and so it came about. And this is why we've had even theocracies that just made no distinction between their religion and their government. But but so these people trying to think that God instituted all of this just because their text makes reference to it. But even if Moses didn't write these words, by the way, but even if we were to believe that Moses wrote Genesis, Moses is writing Genesis when there's an awful lot of people walking around on the earth, and he's writing this many, 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 many years after it allegedly could have occurred, and only now are we getting this authoritative, as it were, word in terms of what it is, or what it meant or how it came about. And so, just because somebody comes along thousands and thousands of years after this pair bonding has been going on to make some statements about it, it doesn't allow that to kind of sequentially preempt all that went on before.
Well, let's talk about
something
what they
historically weird going on here.
Let's talk about what they do leave out in the biblical sense. You've got many notions of marriage throughout the Reed. Okay.
Oh yeah.
And one of the things that we have within the Reed is this: marriage was like this. A man could have as many wives as he could afford. In other words, women were treated like chattel. And so if you want to define biblical marriage, it's more or less, how many women can you purchase? I mean, this is why I think that people who try to stay tethered to the biblical text to say, this is my morality now, it's going to be identical to the suggestions of the past. I mean, that sickens me. The United States of America, I'm proud to be an American, but I'm not proud about the early aspects of what we did to the Indians and I don't like that. I'm partly Indian myself, a Native American, I should say. And so I don't know why we can't continue to move forward. It's like we want to go back and say, oh, biblical marriage has always been this and it's been fixed. It's always been the same yesterday, today, and forever. That's simply not true.
No.
Throughout the
That-
text, it's been many things. And so I don't understand why they can't see that. And so polygamy was very, very much in play. And these people who want to be so biblical, they're not putting in the Nashville statement that polygamy is the goal for their movement of theology.
So,
it doesn't make
what
sense.
you're saying is, if I were to say win the lottery, and suddenly be the possessor of say $50 million, then I should be able to take on a whole slew of hot babes, and the evangelicals should support that.
I'm simply saying they are that sick, and I'm very much in favor of, if you have someone, cherish that one and be one with that individual and live forever like that. And that's what Rhonda and I are all about. And so
Right.
I hope, when I see two people in love, whether it be a man and another man or a woman and another woman, that just makes me happy, because if you find love to the degree that we have, I applaud that. I can't say anything negative about love. And I really don't think that love has that much to do with gender or anything like that. I told Rhonda the other day, I said, I would be attracted to you regardless of whether you're a woman or not. To me, it doesn't matter.
Well,
My question is, why all the emphasis on sexuality? I'll admit it's taken a lot of years, but I've discovered an intimacy that goes way beyond that. True intimacy is being able to share, to be able to open up and share thoughts, share experience. Sex is just a part of that. I don't know why that is so emphasized.
I personally will admit to being absolutely heterosexual, and that and I'm not going to apologize for that either. But but at the same time, that has more to do with that's who I am, and why does everybody else have to be like me? Or they obviously are not, but when we were talking about pair bonding earlier, I think there's something interesting to note, that many of the arrangements that existed, whether it was polygamy or concubines or marriages and concubine slaves and etc. These were other types of arrangements that did come about more often than not as the result of people who had power and advantage, taking advantage and power over other people. And as a result, I think that it's more likely to make an argument psychologically and anthropologically that that even some of these forms of so-called biblical marriage that they're not being honest about are really forms of oppression, and as a result, their claims for biblical purity and morality is a joke, because this is not moral, this is not purity, this is not honest relationships between people, whether you're talking about two. Now, I'll be honest with you, when I look at it, I don't understand polygamy. But is it possible that there could be relationships that involve more than two people? For me, I don't think so. Not for me, but I don't know how other people operate. I'm not a woman. I'm not transgendered. I'm not any of these other people. How could I ever know what it's like to be them? I don't know what it's like to be a bat. I don't know what it's like to be a dog. I don't know what it's like to be anything other than myself. And so, to me, I think that it's a bit oppressive to take one's power and advantage that they might have and expect that you're going to now dictate to other people how it is going to work for them. I don't get it.
Back in my Bible days, I remember when I was getting ready to marry my current wife. We've been together 36 years now. But I can actually remember, and I say this kind of shamefully, but this is just the way I thought in those days, looking forward to have someone who would be so submissive because she understood the Bible, I understood the Bible, we know what it said about marriage. And so I had someone who would be, at least I thought. These days, I'm so glad that that was interrupted. But so, that's what you're saying, Bob. And
Yeah.
it's
That's so abusive. It's so abusive. Yeah.
Daryl, when did Tina quit bowing before you?
Well, fortunately, we never were quite that bad. But she, when she finally got to be herself, I don't know. It's we spent a few years otherwise, and we could make it work. But I tell you what, it's nothing like what it is now. I wouldn't trade this relationship we have now for all the submissive whatevers.
Before Lisa and I have been together for 29 years. On a day before we had even gotten married, I said something to her where I was telling her what I thought she should do, and she looked at me very sternly and she said, "You're not going to talk to me that way." I liked that. It surprised me, and it pleased me. It really did. I was, of course, I was just giving advice because I thought I knew better. But I wasn't really looking for somebody who's going to be submissive. But I like that she stood up, maintained her own identity and her own sovereignty, and that was wonderful. That was wonderful. So, I mean, from the very beginning of our marriage, it was very clear to both of us we were our own persons and responsible for ourselves, and not surrendering any of that personal responsibility in being married. And I think it's worked out really well for us.
One of the things that I saw that is within Christianity, and this is not within all Christianity, I'm talking about some of Christianity, was that women were looking at their husbands to be like Christ. In other words, it was like they were really, really dissatisfied with who they married, and they wanted their husbands to be like Jesus. And likewise, they also, men wanted their wives to be like Jesus. And it's like no one got to be themselves. And so it's, I would find it strange if Rhonda wanted me to be like Jesus instead of like me. I would rather be myself with her than to be like Jesus. And so I think that these people who are trying to sell these kinds of statements, I don't think that they find any satisfaction in themselves. I don't think they have any self-worth. I think it's they look for God value. They don't have any self-esteem. I think they.
Can I say
that.
a very
Yes.
bad joke?
Yeah, go for it.
The thing that Lisa likes about me that is most Christ-like is that I hang around.
Oh my goodness!
Sorry, that was a bad joke.
It is.
No, you're right though. I mean, people are pretending to some sort of position or anointing or authority, or my goodness, I found it a challenge just to figure out how to be me, let alone where am I going to get this insight and this authority and this skill in being able to run the life of my wife?
Right. Right. When I have conversations with people that are very much like a John Piper, it's like, I really don't want to be like Jesus. And when they hear that, they go, "Do what? You don't want to be like Jesus?" And I typically say, "No, I don't. I want to be me. I think that I can do better than Jesus." And when they hear me say that, they feel as if I'm, blaspheming, God himself. And so the conversation doesn't go very far. And so that's unfortunate in my opinion. But it's to me, I think it's about learning how to let go of what other people think about you, and it's learning how to find out who you are. People need to explore. Who are you? What are you afraid of? Why do you have to read the Jesus narrative to find your identity? Why can't you find your value? That is, look inside, see what you're worth. I mean, that's worth exploring. When I look at individuals, I keep telling people, you're of value, you're priceless. You don't have to be like Jesus. Be you. Be you. I don't care if you believe in God or not. What I care about is whether you have a healthy measure of self-esteem. That matters to me. For you, I want you to be healthy. I want you to feel good about yourself, because people who do not feel good about who they are, they're not getting their needs met. And I think we need our needs met before we can ever, have any of our desires ever fulfilled. And so that's me.
Let me say something about self-esteem here. I think that there's some people who like to poo-poo the idea of self-esteem, and there's some people I think who overstate the problem of self-esteem.
True.
I don't want people to feel good about themselves simply because we somehow give them this perspective that allows them to feel good about themselves. I want people to have practical, realistic, authentic reasons for understanding why, as human beings, they really are valuable. I want them to be able to see that clearly for what it is, and then to be able to look at themselves in the mirror and say, I'm an example of humanity, and I possess these various different parameters of humanity, and this is an extremely valuable thing. I am a very valuable existence. And so I want their sense of self-esteem to not just be some sort of feeling that they have, not some feel-good lie that they tell themselves, but rather some authentic encounter with a genuine, honest, fair assessment of themselves and the value of what it is to be human. That's what I want. So I believe in that kind of self-esteem, and that's important.
With that, I think everyone can make their own contribution. And that's what we need. We need individuals contributing what they bring to the table.
It looked to me like Diana was going to say something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, a few days ago, I read an article that addressed the self-esteem issue, and I saw in there something that I'd held for a long time that was quite opposite to what the current trend seems to be, where the idea of imbuing self-esteem by constantly affirming the kids, the participation trophies, the you're really great, without them displaying anything about that first, really doesn't work. The whole idea that works is let them accomplish something and find the self-esteem that way, and it means so much more than it does by simply shoving it down their throats.
I would agree with that, but I would even take it further. I think that even self-esteem based on what we have done well is also somewhat short-lived. It's better than being praised simply because, well, you got up this morning. Bless you, you wonderful person. But
I took a dump. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Good. Yeah. I can see that your eyelids work. Well, wow, you're a wonderful person. No, but I do think though that when we stop to think of what it is to be human, the qualities and the potential that we possess, without regard to what we may have done with it, I think there's something fundamentally very valuable right there. That becomes, when you believe in that becomes a better motivator for actually going out and doing worthwhile things that are praiseworthy. So I really think that the most powerful identity that we can have is an honest, wondrous assessment of value of ourselves simply for being in our existence as human beings. That there's a great deal there that is valuable, even in its simple existence, and in its potential without regard to where the behavior has been in the past, where the behavior might be headed in the future, that there's a certain value there that has to do with the nature of simply being human, that is in fact denied by the failure to perform well.
The way that I look at it is rather simple, and I encourage my children and grandchildren to do the same. When I look at my hand, I'm extremely thankful for my hand. I value my hand, and I would say that I value my hand before I ever do anything with my hand, because I have value
Right.
in the fact that I have a hand, and
Yeah.
I'm so thankful to have hands, eyes, legs. I see other people who don't have legs, and it kills me inside. I see so many people who don't have sight, and it kills me inside. I see so many people who are, live life without all of their limbs, so many things. They lack so much, and I'm thankful. And so when it comes to just the physical aspects, I find value in me before I do anything. And then when I start accomplishing this and that, I find value in that. And so I keep patting myself on the back. But I couldn't do that, Bob, back when I was being taught that I was wretched. I was a sinner. I was unclean. Totally
And that had to do with your
depraved.
essence, just as an existence.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
you were born already
my
that
my my
disgusting.
all of my righteousness was just as filthy rags. I was taught that over and over and over again, and I couldn't feel good about me at all. And so I could look in the mirror, and I'm just not good enough. I would have to look like Jesus, or walk like Jesus, be like Jesus in every aspect. And so the only thing that God could look at would be blood all over me, because that's the only thing that he satisfied. And I'm talking about one particular model of the Christian narrative, not all. Every Christian narrative isn't the same. Some Christian narratives make a lot of sense to me, and some of them have nothing to do with belief in God. And so this is why I wrote this. I said this years ago. I said, Jesus was an advocate for humanity, not a theologian for God. Let me repeat that. Jesus was an advocate for humanity, not a theologian for God. I saw that one day years ago, about 1982, when I started doing serious exegesis. I saw Jesus as someone who was fighting for human beings to feel good about who they were, not about who God was. Number two, when I assess Christianity, I look at it like this. Christianity doesn't own Jesusness. Let me state that again. Christianity doesn't own Jesusness. Hence, some of us resonate with the person, not the ism, but the person. And so whether Jesus is a myth or not, the character Jesus, the person Jesus, and what he accomplished, I resonate with that. I resonate with someone who says, we can love our neighbors all day long, but until we start loving our enemies, when will life change? We're not going to get any better. In other words, we can stay in this herd instinct context, and we're going to keep an us versus them mentality. At some point, we've got to come to the place where we can say, wow, those people who think differently, I've got to embrace them, have conversations with them. I've got to get in dialogue in a manner that says I'm not going to approach them with such violence and hatred. And that, to me, is the step in the right direction. As for North Korea, what I would have done if I were a president a long time ago when the conflict started, I would have gotten scores of students from over there and scores of students here, and I would have had them trade places, simply because if students from there could come over here to see who we are, students from here could go over there to see who they are, we could get to know one another. We've got to get on the same page somehow. I don't think our politicians are going to do this, but I think that we can do this in school systems where people are being educated as to who we are, how we react to this and that. And so that would be my approach, but I don't see that that's the narrative that we have today. We have Rocket Man, politicians, and all of that, and so it's gone crazy. But back to the topic, I don't know. I find value in my hand, in what I do with my hand, and so
And ultimately,
right,
value in our consciousness,
right, yeah,
in being consciously aware organisms. The fact that we are self aware and aware of each other, and thereby also capable of various forms of relationship. This, this is the potential for real value right there. And so that even people who lack some of those other assets, such as hands and feet, uh, they are not doomed to a meaningless existence, or a existence where their existence is any less valuable. It may be challenging in an additional way.
Um,
But
a comment did come up. It was a private comment, and I do want to answer it, and it has to do with Jesus. What is my position on Jesus? My position is this: I'm committed to a process, not a conclusion. And I find mythicists and people who are not, I find them fighting for conclusions rather than staying in the process. Hopefully that answers your question, because so many people are trying to throw people under the bus based upon an apologetic of the mythicist argument and others on the other side of the coin. I see both at a disadvantage. Neither camp is involved in the process, and so I'm very much a person committed to the process, not a conclusion. There are various ideas that we could deal with when dealing with the possibilities of whether Jesus existed or not, but this is not what's being stated in debates and in recently marketed books. And any time that you see theologians and atheists in this context marketing books, beware. This isn't measured talk. Okay, hopefully that answered that question. A little bit off topic, but let's go back to topic. Because Diana, I want you to tell me what we can do for you. I mean, these statements are coming out. It's disparaging not just you, but people like you. And I don't know what to do. I need to do something that will stop the nonsense. And I'm going to reach out to these people. I'm not going to throw them under the bus, but I'm going to try to help improve their lives by giving them a few lessons, possibly in linguistics, so they can grasp what some of the authors might have been suggesting.
Well, I'd say that you're already doing as much as can humanly be done. What I'd like to see the people who wrote the Nashville statement and people who align with them do, or at least try to do, is understand that we are people, just like they are. We have our hopes, we have our dreams, we have our needs, just like they do. That we are not exactly as they are is really meaningless, because no one is exactly like anyone else. The fact that we engage in same-sex, we have same-sex attraction, whereas most of the population doesn't, should be meaningless. The fact that we, the group I'm in, has a gender that does not necessarily align with what the OBGYN saw when he first hauled us out of our mother's crotch, is really meaningless. That's all affectation. The real person is in the mind, is in the heart. As long as you can see that, most of your work is done.
yeah, exactly.
In the Willie Nelson Bible, I think he said it best. He said, I may not be normal, but nobody is. I like it. Show me normal.
That's good. That's good. Would any of you like to add any more to this show before we go off air?
I would just like to say that there can be some criticism some might offer as to certain specific theories that try to explain a lot of this. And there are, as I mentioned earlier, a number of different theories. But but they're really the only difference between them is their attempt to understand just what explains what's going on. None of those theories, none of them, that are based on any kind of scientific research, really give room for what we see here in the Manhattan Declaration or the Nashville Statement, or what is traditionally, this hate language that comes from this religion, and of course, a lot of religions. Christianity isn't the only one. That condemns this. It's sad. I would hope that we would see the human race kind of grow out of this, and come to its senses and deal with it. The last thing I want to say about this is that I think there's also something a little bit overly simplistic. Some people identify as men, some people identify as women. I think that's perhaps a little bit artificially too clear. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some transgendered people who are really more like 80-20 or whatever. And I don't even know what all the parameters would have to be in order for a person to say, I identify as male or I identify as female. I, I don't. I think that we're talking about this sometimes as if there are some clear demarcations here that exist when there's really perhaps more like a continuum. And so that even though I identify as a male, I have no idea if I am like other males. Am I? But the truth is, I don't know, and I don't care. I just like being me, and I'm glad that it's working for me. And so I really think that in some ways, a lot of this condemnation is coming from people who haven't got a clue what they're even talking about, don't understand the complexity of humanity, and or the need for each of us to truly endear ourselves to the people in our lives. People like me, people like Diana, people like Dr. Jones. We all are people who, if we're going to be interacting socially with anybody, we need people who can like us, people who for who we are, and people we can like for who they are. So this need to somehow define what it means to be this or to be that, it strikes me as being a little bit anal retentive, a little bit too beside the point, and a bit too rigid. And now it's easy for me to say that perhaps because I tend to be what's thought of as in the norm, But at the same time, so what? It's I'm just me, and I don't even know I don't care what that really would imply or mean.
I was talking to a gentleman this week, and this is, I don't know, it's sickening. This person is very much a Christian. This person is all against homosexuality. So we started talking, and it shifted, that is, into a discussion about what's going on in the landscape of racism here in America. And this person said this, and I could not believe my ears. But hey, the entire conversation was crazy. But this person actually said, blacks were better off being brought over here being slaves than they were just staying in Africa. I could not believe that someone in 2017 would hold that kind of position or even say that to me. I was floored. I mean, I was floored. And so I did speak up, but there are a lot of ignorant people out there. I don't want to disparage them. I'm hoping that at some point we can take people who have such an againstness and educate them. And I think that it's best to educate people when they know that you love them. I think it's hard for a professor, a teacher, to do any kind of teaching effectively that is for those they might be teaching if they don't have students who know that they're somewhat cared about. And I think there's a large number of people that walk right out the door not hearing anything because they feel as if their professor doesn't give a damn about them. And so I think that caring about each other is the first step in trying to improve life for everyone. And so when I showed a little bit of compassion in this discussion, I could see a little bit of a shift. And hopefully I can impact people's lives by showing compassion, showing my willingness to listen, not just talk. And I'm hoping that people will become more tolerant, more understanding of each other. Because, you know, I don't think that people come to these, a place of such bias accidentally. I think it comes about by various experiences. And I think that people need to be rescued. I think people need healing. I don't think anyone needs condemnation. What are your thoughts on what I just said?
I think we need accountability, but we certainly don't need condemnation.
I'm simply saying I hear people who are ranting. We've had people come into the studio ranting. And I keep saying, that's not going to heal anyone. I don't care what your complaint is about racism. That's not going to do anything for anyone. There was a black gentleman, and I keep applauding him because he approached the KKK. Yes, a black gentleman approached the KKK, and what he did was he took his compassion for human beings and he embraced them. He didn't agree with them, but he loved them. He nurtured them. 200 people walked away from the KKK as a result of this man's compassion for these people who were trapped in such bigotry and hatred. And so I like that approach. I applaud that approach. And so I think that if we approach these people who have signed this Nashville statement, it's going to take people who will love them and nurture them, because I don't think they have eyes to be able to see right now. I don't think that you could just take a philosophical argument or even a biblical argument to them and they would change, Bob. I think what they need is to experience compassion from a person like me, from a person like you, from a person like Daryl, especially from a person like Diana. I mean, Diana, you can do so much to change this entire thing. You can be on this program and you can articulate in a manner that you're so compassionate toward these people who are so abusive, that is, toward who you are. And yet you can show them that you can rise above that. You can take the high road, and I think that will change people. What say you?
Well, thank you for that. I hope you don't give me more credit than I deserve. If I may go back to the comment Bob made most recently about what's it like to be a man, what's it like to be a woman. I heard him speaking to me because there is something I really need to work on. I find myself speaking like a traditionalist, a person who accepts the gender binary, and that's really not the way to go. I know quite a few people who espouse the non-binary position, and I keep forgetting that their position is at least as valid as the one I find myself speaking of, and maybe it belies my age, maybe it belies something else, I'm not sure. But yeah, there is no binary. There is a continuum. I mean, even when I look at myself, a lot of Edward lives on in Diana. So why don't I see that and espouse that? So yeah, I'm on no pedestal here. I've got a lot of work to do. And I hope I can do it. I hope I can really come to a good place where I can speak and do as well as I could.
Yeah, and you know, the thing is this: you're you, and even if we don't know exactly how to organize the categories, at the same time, you're you. You know what you feel. You know what's going on inside of you, and you also know that that doesn't necessarily strike and fit in what you've been told is the norm. You're familiar with the normal curve, right? The statistical normal curve.
Yes, I am.
So when it comes to the genders, although there's a bit of a continuum here, I think there's a continuum here that involves two normal curves that are overlapping. So that there's like two modal areas. So that probably the vast majority of people are clearly one or clearly the other, the vast majority. But within that continuum, there are two modal curves that are occurring, if you see what I'm saying. And in that, I think that the people who are not necessarily within the standard deviation of either mode, that it can be kind of confusing trying to subscribe to the binary theory.
That's good. That's good. You know, I was asked a question the other day, and I keep being asked this question: are you an atheist or are you a theist? And what I said, it almost shocked them. I said, well, number one, I'm not looking for a label. I'm really not looking for a label. And I'm not in a hurry to form an opinion on the question. And so when I come on the show and say, yes, I'm multi-axial and I'm a multi-axial theist, don't take that too far. In other words, forming an opinion on something that I have nothing to work with, that doesn't make sense to me. And so in Diana's case, I would say, in analogy, don't look for a label. Just be you, whatever that is. I mean, life is messy. We have to admit to that. I don't care if you're me, if you're Bob, if you're Daryl, or Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, Obama. Life is messy. Life is not as clear as most people would have you think. And so we have this struggle that we all go through, and it's uniquely so for all of us. All of us have this unique life, and it has its good, bad, and ugly spots, I guess. And so let's just deal with it, and let's get other human beings who can accept us for who we are, and let's be committed to that journey together, because this is one of the reasons that I love NCG. It's about community. It's about a social experiment in that we need each other. We really do. I mean, if we are going to somehow come out of this as winners, in a sense, we definitely can't go this alone. We can't be this maverick that's just out there. And this is what scares me about so many atheists. They shove away from all kinds of social aspects. And I'm not putting down atheists, but I'm simply saying that a lot of atheists that I've met behind closed doors, they will say, I really enjoyed the social construct of the church. I get that. I mean, if there's anything that church gives to people, it gives people a place to go, and that's that construct that, where you can have a family, if you will. And this is why we have the studio. People come here and they become family. We love one another. We work with each other, and that's wonderful. And that's what is so telling about the NCG community. And yes, we're not in the same building, but we are connecting, building bridges. Those things are very, very important in life. But I would argue that it's sometimes when people start pushing me, are you a theist? Are you an atheist? I'm going, I'm not looking for a label. I don't know. Give me some time. I'm not in a hurry. Yeah. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
Absolutely. I myself was a member of a Unitarian Universalist church a few years ago, and it was exactly because I was looking for community. I was, if you want to call it family. That particular church wasn't working for me, so I kind of dropped out after a while. I really hadn't looked around much in this neighborhood, but that is the reason, I think the main reason I love you guys so much, I love NCG so much, is that there is community. I mean, I feel a part of you guys, if you don't mind my saying that.
Yeah.
It's as
Hope
if,
you do.
I belong here. I hope you don't mind that I hope you don't see me overstepping when I say that.
No.
But
no.
it's a place where I feel welcome.
Yeah.
And I thank you very, very much for that, because it's something I truly need. I think 99.44% of us really need that. I know a couple people who claim to be absolute hermits. I know one guy who lives in the Mojave Desert, but he still goes onto YouTube from time to time, to post his ideas. So there's some sort of community he's looking for also.
I would say this. This is how confident I am. If Donald Trump were to come to the studio and stay here for 1 week, and if I could get Daryl and Bob Graves to be here as well, we could go out to lunch, we could do dinner and all of that, and we could have you, Diana, come in as well, and the rest of the people who watch this show. If we would be compassionate, let me tell you something, Donald Trump would walk out of here completely changed. I don't think that he would be the shock jock president that he is. I think that compassion moves people. I think people are looking for that. This is the way human beings succeed. I mean, it's about connection. It's not about disconnecting. And this is the thing that I don't like about theology. It's like they create this disconnection. What do you mean, disconnection? Oh, God's going to take some people and place them in heaven, and others are going to be in hell. And so that disconnection that's unsettling. I mean, I was testifying in a sense to how my brother felt. He felt like he could lose his salvation during his sleep time. And he would pray every night, oh, God, forgive me of all of my sins. In Jesus' name, amen. And then he would pray it again and again and again, because he was fearful that he would do something in his sleep that would just take him away from salvation. And he was frightened that he would be completely in outer darkness because of something that he might do in his sleep. And I hurt for him. And it was only a few years ago, right after my father passed away, that I was able to share something with him that somewhat set him free. But he's been walking around for many, many years as a damaged individual simply because someone thought it was wise to preach hellfire and brimstone to him. And this is why I keep saying teaching hell is child abuse. I love my T-shirt. I wear it all over Pensacola. I get a lot of looks and a lot of people shooting the finger at me and all of that. But that's all right, because I want to share something good with people. Teaching hell is child abuse. So many people, they don't know when children hear a message of hellfire and brimstone, that terrorizes them to the nth degree. They're scared to death, especially sensitive children. And so I'm all about trying to do things in a better way. And so I challenge pastors all the time around here. If you preach on hellfire and brimstone, do that to the older people who enjoy feeling that way. Don't do it to the kids in Sunday school.
One thing I don't like at all is one of the church fathers, I forget if it was Augustine or if it was someone else, writing that one of the advantages of being in heaven was the ability to gaze upon the misfortune of the damned. And there you are, the us and them again.
Right.
It's that separation. It boils my beans is the best way I can put it.
Okay, Daryl, I want you to give me your best ever statement about being a compassionist. We need that now.
Wow. Okay, I'll do the best I can. Not that there's any pressure here.
No pressure.
But being a compassionist, it's tops. I mean, I have been something other than that a great deal of my life, so I know the difference. I know the difference between being someone who's trying to be good and trying to obey God, which should be the best position to be in. But being able to be compassionate, to not judge people without knowing anything about them is tragic. But to be understanding and recognize that I only know what I've experienced in life. I can't know what others have experienced, what they've gone through. And just understanding something as simple as that encourages that compassion within. And finding yourself in that position is, I know nothing better. That's all I can say.
Diana, put your best spin on compassionism.
Well, my feeling is that compassionism is absolutely necessary for our survival. We evolved as a social species. Now, millennia, centuries ago, the circle was so much smaller than it is now, or should be now. You had the family, you had the tribe. But it seems that little by little, as time is going on, that circle of family, if you will, those we should care about, is ever expanding. And what I want to see is that compassionism, that social recognition, recognized by more people than it is. It is so unfortunate to see people who still see only the clan, still see only that small group. We are a species that is worldwide. There are many cultures, there are many ways of going about our day, but they are, for the most part, all valid, with some minor exceptions. Thank you very much, radical Islam. Let's pull that one in here. But we need to understand that other people, all other people, have the need to live as fulfilled people. And that, I think, is the root of compassionism. To be able to try to see what another person might be going through and do your best to understand it, or at least acknowledge it. And I think that's about it.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Hey, Bob, I don't want gold. I want platinum here. Go for it.
Well, compassion is impossible if you don't really like yourself and like other people. And I think that compassion is impossible when you cannot accept the fact that part of what makes people who they are will be things you don't understand. And I don't think that this means that we have to just accept everything and anything willy-nilly, but I do think it means that we need to reserve a great deal of our opinion concerning other people, and to recognize that people, everyone, will, regardless of who they are, will only become something better to be by being loved. And so that without regard to where you find someone, if you're the least bit interested in people developing into even more of their potential, it's going to take that kind of love and believing in them. I'm not really sure, what else to say. It in some sense, although I've been using a lot of words here, I think that bottom line, compassion is a rather simple thing.
I agree. Today, there are a lot of people who are frustrated. And we need to realize frustration will happen. People will become frustrated. And I hear people all the time saying, wow, I'm so frustrated. But we need to understand that frustration is not the key to any door. There are keys to doors, but frustration isn't one of them. And so what are we going to do with our frustration? What are we going to do with our anger? What are we doing with these things that hold us back? And this is why being a compassionist makes sense, because I think at the end of the day, this makes sense to everyone. Love is kind. Love is patient. But I'm not talking about the kind of patience that resigns itself. I'm not talking about the kind of patience that's just passive. I'm talking about a very, very, very positive type of patience that simply waits for the opportunity to do something good. That kind of patience. So if I say that love is kind, it's patient, and it doesn't keep a record of wrongs. In other words, I'm not willing to hold something against someone simply because they have a problem, but I'm willing to transcend that, in that I would like to see humanity transcend its current condition. The human need out there is great, and we can't meet the human need by disparaging one another, disenfranchising one another. We've got to meet the human need head on, and that means that we need to learn how to love unconditionally, accept each other unconditionally. We need to learn how to become allies, and this, yes, takes time. Frustration will be there, but it's not the key to any door. Frustration will be the loudest voice in the room at times, but it doesn't open anything. And this is why we must come together. We must form community. We must encourage one another. We must lift each other up. I'm talking about atheists and theists together, lifting each other up to where we can transcend to a point where we can accomplish what others said we could not accomplish. With that said, good evening.